Good morning, Dan and Amy. So it looks like we have another issue where at least I can agree with Juan Williams. So it's always fun to forge non-traditional alliances around policy.
Oh, my goodness.
We're pleased now to be joined by our friend Juan Williams, Fox News contributor, columnist for The Hill. Juan, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning. So now, good news. You probably heard it because you know what's going on, but I'll reiterate anyway. Tax credit scholarships in Illinois as part of education funding bill. So you're going to have choice for all kinds of families that didn't have choice at the K through 12 level in Illinois, at least for the next 5 years.
God bless them. I mean, this is what we need. We need more, to my mind, power to the parents, because then if the parents have a choice, and I think they're always going to look out for their child first. I don't think there's any way you get away from love for your children, and allowing parents as opposed to bureaucrats to make choices about education, to find the best education, to me is just terrific. Now, I know that the critics are out there and they'll say, well, most kids go to public schools. What about parents who aren't involved, et cetera? I think it shakes up the system. So on this one, I think that we need some disruption because, to my mind, especially for poor kids, the system, the education system, doesn't give them advantage. It disadvantages them in a way that cripples them. And then, of course, we get into arguments about, social welfare and criminal justice and all the rest. But I think it starts with education. And until we get the schools right, the rest of it is just going to be trouble.
Well, we know education is the best way out of poverty, or at least I think that way. So
Yeah.
Do you think there should be a federal program where there's a chance for kids to attend better schools than their local neighborhood schools?
Of course. I mean, I think this is the root, and we've got to, shake the existing structure, Amy, to the point where you start to see new leaves, some green leaf pop up in what is right now a dry and withering system. So, to me, you could do this on a national level, I'm all for local control of schools, don't mistake me, but I think you've got to give people incentive to say, how can we do a better job? How can we make it so that the children are at the forefront, not the union deals, the contracts, not the administrators or even the teachers, who I love greatly, but you got to find good teachers. And the idea is it's all in service to giving that kid, no matter where that kid's from, a chance to become, successful.
All right, let's build on the foundation of that agreement. A recent piece that you wrote for The Hill is on gerrymandering, with you suggesting that momentum is building at the federal level against gerrymandering. I suppose that there's a lot of lip service paid to that on both sides of the aisle, but certainly Luis Gutierrez doesn't want redistricting reform. Have you ever seen his district?
No, I never have.
It's like a horseshoe right around the city to pick up Latino areas around the city. So, and both parties do it, and we know this, and this is why I think going into Illinois' governor's race next year, and part of the fight is, whoever has the governor has the inside track to control the map after the 2020 election. That's how important map making is, right?
Yeah, so they're all gaming the system, right? So this is politicians versus us, because the politicians want to retain power. So if they control the state legislature, if they can control the governor's seat, then they draw the map so that their team, or their party in this case, has the greatest opportunity to dominate. I think the most egregious example of this is Wisconsin, your neighbor there, where the Democrats won the majority of votes for the state legislature, but the Republicans ended up with a super majority in the state legislature. I don't know how you do that. I guess they use some kind of computer program.
Yeah, good cartography.
To draw the districts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. But I do think, and what I wrote about in The Hill, Dan, was I said, people talk about disapproval for Congress, and it's now in the mid-70s. Almost everybody doesn't like what's going on in Congress. They're paralyzed. They don't get things done. They just bicker. And I said, well, look at the maps. And the maps right now, if you're a Democrat, you don't have to listen to anybody on the right. You don't have to have a conversation. If you're on the right, you don't have to listen to anybody on the left. In fact, you don't even have to listen to anybody in your own party unless they're far, far to the right and saying, I'm going to challenge you in the party primary.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so right now you get people like Schwarzenegger, McCain, Kasich in Ohio saying, well, you know what, we're Republicans, but maybe it's time to just do this on a level playing field so that it's not just about party politics.
Have you ever seen Luis Gutierrez's congressional district?
Yeah.
It gerrymanders in and out of Hispanic neighborhoods to guarantee him victory every time.
That's what Dan was saying. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so, but what are the prospects? As kind of said, you hear from both sides of the aisle that this is something we should do, and then there are court decisions that make it somewhat complicated because there's pro gerrymandering decisions under the auspices of the Voting Rights Act to provide for supermajority minority districts. So I mean, it's one thing to say it because, as you said, it's easy to understand it's the politicians picking their voters. And it's another thing to get real critical mass to get beyond lip service.
Right. And so I don't think the politicians will ever do it. But right now we're at a moment where you have some politicians saying, you know what, I think the system's a little screwy and not serving the public. Certainly it's not serving the idea that everybody has a vote and everybody has a voice and everybody gets representation. But the courts right now, Dan, are moving in. So you have the Supreme Court, for example, saying that with regard to what a lower federal court found in Texas, which was a violation of voter rights because they drew the districts in such a way as to concentrate the minorities and allow the Republicans, in this case, to dominate the state. And then the court said that was illegal. You were denying people proper representation. Now the Supreme Court's going to look at it. And they also want to look at what happened in Wisconsin that I described earlier, where the Democrats get more votes, but the Republicans get the supermajority. So all of this is at play all of a sudden in the court. So while the politicians may not do it, it may be that their hand suddenly gets forced by court action.
Well, it'd be welcome in Illinois. I mean, there's been initiatives in Illinois that have been killed by, of course, Democrats who are in a supermajority position here
right.
to reform the districts. And I don't see why we don't just kind of go to the Iowa model, have computers draw it with the principles the Supreme Court laid out, compactness, contiguousness, respect for municipal borders, and computer draws it. You have a lot more competitive elections. Both in terms of number and the quality of the competitiveness, and isn't that better?
Man, amen. I couldn't agree more. California has gone to a bipartisan commission now that draws the districts to get away from the Democrats who would dominate in California, doing the same thing out there. So to me, this seems like common sense. I mean, come on.
there's the you should
there's that argument.
You should argue the case before the Supreme Court. Just say, look, justices, hey, come on. I mean, come on
fellas.
Already.
Really? What's the matter with you guys?
All right. Before we let you jump, we got to get your take, at least your prognostication on the Graham-Cassidy last best effort by Republicans to replace Obamacare, at least in some form.
Well, they have momentum at the moment. I don't think there's any getting away from the reality that, the president's putting the pressure on. He's sending Vice President Pence around to put pressure on people. Some of the people who voted against the last so-called skinny bill, if you'll recall, like Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, even John McCain of Arizona seems to be wavering. McCain's governor, Governor Ducey in Arizona, said, oh, yeah, it's okay with him, even though it looks like it would result in more people being uninsured in the state losing money. And I think the whole push here is to get a win. They feel like, they were embarrassed last time. A lot of the base said, we put you up there. You would promise for years. You had so many repeal votes when Obama was in office, and now you have the power and you didn't do anything. So I think it's out of a sense of embarrassment because the actual bill itself is not any different than the last bill, and it's not an improvement in terms of more insurance, lower premiums, better coverage, and better consumer protection for patients. But it's about politics, and it's about getting a win for the president at this moment.
We just have to make sure Senator John McCain has no surprises at the last second because they need the simple majority of 51 votes.
Or
they need 50 because 50. they get
Pence. Yeah, right. He is one. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Juan.
No, I was just going to say, though, I wish they had a good bill, because the last bill had 12% support, so neither Republicans nor Democrats backed it, and this bill insures even fewer people and has fewer consumer protections. But so I just wish people would get together and pass a bill that made sense for us as Americans, improve Obamacare and its failings.
He is Juan Williams, Fox News contributor, columnist for The Hill. His latest piece for The Hill is on the topic we've been talking about, gerrymandering reform. Juan, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a good day, Dan, Amy.
You too.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.